Good evening all, and welcome. Before the video begins, I think given the circumstances, it's time to share my Patreon, which I've just revamped by the way. Many of you might not even know what it is, or what you get for signing up, so I'm gonna do a brief run through of all the perks of joining. Just so you know, with every tier you go up, you get the stuff from before too. So, for joining the Opal tier, you get a thank you at the very end of every video, an exclusive Discord flare, and access to all the cool stuff I post on Patreon itself. Next up, Sapphire. You get a special flare on Discord again, invitation to the Patreon only Discord channel to chat and, hang out with me and stuff, which is pretty cool. Things now get more interesting at Topaz. You get a voice token every month, where I'll record anything you want under 2 minutes with a thank you message, plea to your boss, an apology to a friend, whatever you want. As well as free promo copies of books when I do them. There are some left by the way, so hurry because it's first come first served. At Emerald, you can upgrade your voice token to an enhanced voice token for a whopping 5 minutes worth of audio every month, so make the most of it. With Ruby comes great responsibility, as I offer the Power token to this tier. With this, you can select your favourite story topics, make your requests on Discord, and I'll make it into a video, and let everyone know that you selected the topic, if you want to, of course. The tokens keep on coming with Diamond. This tier offers a call token every month, where you can chill with me on a private phone call, as well as being shouted out in a video as a thank you at the start. Finally, we have Onyx, the final tier. I'll be sending you a personalized thank you letter in the mail, and you'll get 2 power tokens every month. Oh, and for anyone signing up from now until September 4th, if you join the Emerald tier or higher, I'll send you a personalized thank you letter, some exclusive Mortis media stickers, and 2 power tokens to use on any story topic you like. To sign up, you can find all the relevant info in the description. It really does help me out more than you know, and it keeps the channel running. I hope to see you there. But anyway, without further ado, it's time to get comfortable. Grab onto your dollies, and let the darkness take control. This is my story about my haunted doll, Claire. She's been featured in books, haunted objects, stories of ghosts on your shelves, a few paranormal podcasts, and the TV show Haunted Towns that aired on Destination America back in 2017. You can still catch reruns of the show on the Travel Channel every now and then. She was in the season finale featuring Madonna, Georgia. Here's my story. As an 8-year-old child, I was given an old porcelain doll by a very dear family friend, Miss Marion. She was constantly coming across things and giving them to me. This doll was the last thing she ever gave to me. I was never really into dolls at all growing up, but I took the doll and placed her in my room in a small child-size rocking chair. The chair sat next to my closet and dresser, right beside my nightstand. The doll was very pretty. She was dressed in a peach and cream-coloured dress with an apron and petticoats. She had little black Mary Jane shoes that, when removed, showed her delicately painted toenails. Her body was soft. Only her head, forearms, hands and legs from the knees down were porcelain. Her lips were pink, and her dark brown hair hung in slightly frizzed and now loose curls. Her eyes were brown. Her cheeks were rosy peach colour, all like mine. Miss Marion made a point of saying the doll reminded her of me, which is why she gave it to me. From the moment the doll, who I named Claire, came into my house, things began to happen. I was always uneasy with Claire. I never wanted to touch her, and when I played in my room, I felt like she was watching me. It wasn't anything to panic about, but I do remember feeling like if I did something wrong, she might actually tell on me. How ridiculous does that sound? The first real occurrence I remember was when I was reading in my room. Ghost stories, if you can believe that. When a musical carousel horse that sat on my dresser began to play. Not just a few notes, which old mechanical music boxes will do at times, but like someone had wound it up fully. I sat stunned and stared at the little horse as it moved up and down in time with the music. Then it just stopped. Not wound down, just suddenly stopped. I was a pretty brave kid. I didn't run, and I didn't tell my parents. I also used to see a shadow man in the hallway or in my parents' bedroom door whilst I was growing up. And if my mom didn't believe me about that, she wouldn't believe about the mundane thing like a music box playing. So I just let it go. The next thing that happened was the voice. For several nights, and on into the years, I was woken up by what sounded like a woman inches from my face, shouting my name. "Jill, wake up." I jump and sit up and find my room empty. Those happenings died down after a few months. She then started to plague my little brother with the same thing, and now he and I are grown and gone, and she's moved on to my dad. The little things started to get to me. I'd put something in a certain place, only to find it later on the floor or on my dresser right next to Claire. All my missing items eventually turned up around her. Once a ring ended up in the pocket of her apron. Books would fall off my shelf, and perfume smells would sometimes fill my room. The doll itself didn't smell at all, but the air around her would. My catalyst to finally getting Claire out of my room was the night I woke up after hearing thumping around my closet. I opened my eyes, sat up in bed, and of course my eyes were drawn to the nightlight where Claire sat. As I watched, the source of the thumping became clear. The rocking chair Claire occupied was rocking on its own. I had thick shag carpet, so there was no way it was rocking just by chance. If that wasn't enough, Claire's feet, which were both turned to the side facing the opposite way from each other, slowly straightened themselves to both be pointing directly up. This part still freaks me out 20 years later. She then turned her head, which was quite impossible to do since it was attached, fixed to her cloth body. She looked towards me, and every music box in my room, 4 of them, started to play all at once. I was frozen in fear. I didn't feel endangered, so as much as I just felt scared of what was happening, I screamed for my mum and dad. The music stopped, but Claire maintained her gaze in my direction. And this is why I hate dolls. Even after that, I couldn't totally get rid of Claire. I ended up stuffing her into the back of a box of a storage closet. She's still there as far as I know. So is the woman who now screams my dad's name in the middle of the night, and not in a good way. While I think she explains some of the oddities that happened in my parents' house, I don't think she is the type at all, especially the Shadow Man. My friend Tim Weisberg is a paranormal/radio podcast host of the show Spooky South Coast, and also an author. He asked me to lend him Claire once he heard my story back in 2011. I obliged, and Claire went to stay with him for a few months. He wrote about his experiences with Claire while she stayed with him in the book Haunted Objects that I mentioned earlier. Temperature changes in the rooms she stayed in, along with hearing voices, were 2 of his notes. Claire also stayed briefly at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast in 2012. The guys from the Haunted Towns show encountered some things in my parents' house while Claire was with them. She now lives at my friend's old haunted house. He's a Hogan, and he and his lower, along with the other house spirits, tend to keep her in line. I have a ghost in my room that loves to throw things at me, but probably the scariest thing that ever happened revolved around one of my porcelain dolls, Caroline. Even my cat avoids her at all costs. The first major thing about Caroline, my haunted porcelain doll, is pretty spooky. It seems like whenever I touch her, any part of her, I get sick or hurt within the next week. That's why I put a little sign by her feet that says "Do not touch" in red capital letters. I think the scariest thing that's happened revolving around her was I saw her move one of her eyes. I don't remember all of everything, but I remember I was sitting on the floor doing homework, and I got up to use the bathroom. Right as I did, I saw her left eye blink, then change direction to look directly at me. Needless to say, I hightailed it out of that room. I live in an old Victorian house in the UK. It's me, my mum, my dad and my sister. Now, my dad and sister aren't very much a fan of yard sales, but we certainly are. Here in the UK they're called boot fairs or car boot sales, depending on where you live. Maybe elsewhere they're called something else. Point being, it's a big yard sale, but you do it in a field and not your yard. Now that that's out the way, my mum is a collector of antiques, all kinds of random stuff, which my dad begrudgingly lets her have and put around the house. What she doesn't put in the house gets left in the garage. Now, on one occasion, we were at a garage sale, and she eyes a porcelain doll. In my mind, it was a hideous thing, but my mother saw it and said that it reminded her of one that she owned as a child and would very much like to purchase it. I think she got it for something like 10p, or 9 cents in America. So that was ridiculously cheap. The woman seemed very happy to get rid of it, and my mother was very happy to have obtained it. She packed it in the car, and we got home. We didn't even take it out until the next day. We put it in the garage because my mother wasn't exactly sure what to do with it, and there it stayed. One thing to mention is that our garage is very secure. It only has one entrance through a side door behind our house, which no one else can access, as our property is very secure. Not only that, we are also very meticulous about organization. The garage is extremely well organized. Everything has its proper place. So, 2 weeks later, when my mum thinks that she might move some stuff around in the house and put up some new antiques, does she remember the doll and think that she might do some work doing up its hair or maybe painting it to make it look nicer before she displays it in our home. She goes into the garage, and that's when she shouts. I hear her screaming for my sister and me to come down straight away, as my father was at work. We go down, and the garage has been absolutely destroyed. Everything is on the floor. There are antiques that have been shattered, vases, paintings that were hanging up that are now on the ground. Some of them look like they've been stepped through. It was absolute carnage. I wish I'd have taken a picture. Anyway, the only thing that seemed to remain untouched was a locked chest of drawers in one of the corners, and the doll sitting on top of it. My mum, cleaning up bits of pottery, looks up and sees this doll, now in a more ominous light, and says that she was sure she didn't leave it there. Remember how organized my family are, so if she says she didn't leave it there, she really didn't leave it there. She was a bit freaked out, asked if any of us had something to do with this, to which we of course both denied. not to mention the fact that she was the sole bearer of the key between her and Dad, as they kept it locked away in their room in the safe. They also had valuables in the locked chest of drawers, you see, and that's why we had to keep it locked away. Anyway, my mum still takes the doll and fixes her up. She looks a lot better after a bit of polish. My mum repaints her lips, does her eyes, and she really is looking top notch. One of her sleeves of her top was actually a bit worn. She finds a very similar thread and fixes it up too. I was very impressed with my mother's work, and she replaced this old Chinese bell with that doll. It went in our living room, which holds another number of antiques. That night, during the middle of the night, we are all suddenly awoken by a loud crash downstairs. We go down, and one of my mother's antique vases that was on the chimney is now shattered on the brickwork below. She was nearly in tears, but knows that it wasn't any of us, because we were all coming downstairs at the same time, seeing what was going on as a reaction to the noise. My dad does a thorough sweep of the house to find nothing. All the windows are closed, all the doors are locked, and there's no way anyone could have gotten away so fast without leaving a trace. The only odd thing, however, is the doll is no longer perched. It is now on the floor. Things start to add up. My dad says he doesn't like the doll and thinks we should get rid of it. My mother, being a no-nonsense kind of woman, absolutely slams him for being ridiculous and says that the vase probably just slipped. But when my father asks then what happened to the garage, is she left speechless and looking at the doll inquisitively. It isn't until a few days later, in broad daylight in the kitchen, when I'm gonna go get some cereal for the morning, that a drawer jumps right out. That's just it. It pushes its way out. With such a loud noise, I run out screaming like a little child. I was beyond terrified and told my mum that there was something weird going on. I had my own suspicions. Ever since we bought that doll, had weird stuff started to happen. So, I did what any sensible person would do. I put it up on eBay. I didn't say it was cursed or anything. I just put up this porcelain doll that my mum had fixed up on eBay. And would you know that we got a buyer within the first 10 hours. It was actually quite a competitive bidding process, and it sold for roughly $100. I packed it away without telling my mother what happened and sold it. When my mum came home from work one of these days, she didn't even notice it was gone, as I had fetched the key and replaced it with the old Chinese bell. It's only after about a week, I think, did she ask who had moved the doll, or Shirley, as she affectionately called it. I said that it broke, and so I put it in the bin last week, and that, well, it was gone now. It had been taken away by the binman. She was a bit upset by this, but honestly she didn't really seem to care all that much. Perhaps she was starting to believe that there was something more spooky with the doll than we originally thought. I was glad to be rid of it, and made sure to put in my eBay listing, absolutely no refunds. My parents still don't know about this, and I think it's better that way. I don't want them to try and track it to buy it again. When I was really young, I was really into strawberry shortcake. This was when I was about 5 or 6. It so happened that she had a younger sister named Apple Blossom, or something like that. Well, I had an Apple Blossom doll that spoke when you squeezed her. She had a button in her hand as well, I think, but I don't remember that much. Point being, I shared a room with my 3 older sisters, and above our bed we had a hammock made out of a curtain for our stuffed animals. I was playing on the bed with Apple Blossom all by myself in the room, and I remember making her speak with all the buttons. And then she said this: "Praise Satan, you're going to hell," in this really deep and creepy voice. Now I knew damn well that that was not one of her sayings, nor was it a normal thing to happen. So I threw the doll off the bed and ran and started crying. Of course, no one believes me. To this day I stick to that story. My oldest sister has the doll in her apartment, and I still find it incredibly eerie. This happened around 7 to 8 years ago. I remember the events leading up to this in great detail, and I'm interested in what other people think of the situation. At the time, I was 17 to 18, and I had a little Russian doll on my bookshelf that my mum got me from one of the friends she made in Russia when she studied abroad there. It's super tiny, about 3 inches tall, a female dressed in traditional Russian clothes. The doll was sat atop a shelf, about 3 to 4 inches back, and behind something else. Now, ever since I was little, the hallway upstairs creeped me out. My bedroom is up at the end of the stair hallway, and the hallway leads up to my bathroom. In order to go to the restroom at night, I have to go through the end/corner of the hallway. It kind of started subtly. Occasionally, around the ages of 6 or 7, I would wake up to find something had fallen. I had a 3D heart puzzle on my makeup box, and I would wake up to find it had fallen on my dresser and split right down the middle. Sometimes I would wake up to find the tiny doll lying face up on the floor. This is where I started to get a little bit creeped out. The doll was set further back than it was tall. If it fell over, wouldn't it have fallen onto the floor face down? Why always face up? This is where things got really freaky, and I'm still really creeped out by it all these years later. I was heading upstairs to the aforementioned bathroom, and I turned on the lights to the hallway before I walked up. Like I said, the hallway always freaked me out. And the lights turned on and then flashed out. When I flipped the switches off, the lights flashed back on and then off again. I figured, it's an old house, whatever, and went to the bathroom anyway. The bathroom light switch did the same thing. I got frustrated by this, so I started to angrily flash the light switch on and off very quickly. During one of the bursts of light, I saw a young man in his early 20s standing directly behind me, with straightish black hair nearing his shoulders. He didn't feel super scary or dangerous or anything, but I still panicked, told my dad that the lights were having issues, and when he flipped the hallway and bathroom light switches, the lights turned on with no issue. I still feel that awful creepy feeling of being watched in the hallways to this day. I felt like I've been watched my whole life while in that hallway. The heart puzzle and the doll started to fall a little more frequently after that. I was clearly not happy about it, so when my parents were gone, I yelled for whatever it was to leave me alone. After that, the puzzle and doll stopped falling. I even moved the tiny doll downstairs and out of my room. The awful part of the top hallway still gives me this super creepy feeling though, like I'm being watched. I've had friends who've stayed in the guest room downstairs and say that they felt like someone was watching them all night, and that they heard lots of creaking noises. What this comes down to is, am I safe? I mean, I've grown up in this house, but is this ghost/spirit/whatever biding its time? Or is it all my super active imagination? Is it just me being paranoid about seeing things that aren't there? Or is this a nice ghost? Or are there other things I need to worry about? I'm just scared. Scared of being judged. I'm curious what people think. Did the ghost actually leave? Was he not real to begin with? Do I need to worry? My aunt has always been a lover of creepy things. She likes gory, spooky, haunted things. She's sort of the lovable oddball of the family. She's always been crazy about these things called living dead dolls. For those of you who don't know what they are just terrifying looking collectible dolls. Basically, purchasable nightmare fuel. She'd bought a bunch of them and had them on display in her home. I've never been a fan of dolls, let alone ones meant to be scary, so this creeps me out a lot. She ran into some financial trouble and decided to start selling things on eBay to make some extra cash for bills. As much as it broke her heart, she decided to sell one of her more popular living dead dolls on eBay. Almost immediately after she posted the doll, there was an offer. She gladly said her goodbyes, boxed up the doll and mailed it. No problem. A week or so later she got the box back, in the original packaging she sent it out in, but with a note saying undeliverable address, meaning she must have written it down wrong, or it wasn't an acceptable place to deliver a package. My aunt figured it was just a spelling error and didn't think anything of it. She didn't open the package, she just put it in her closet. She went on eBay to try and contact the buyer, and to her surprise when she logged on, she already had a message from the buyer saying how she got the doll and how much she loved it and couldn't wait to brush her hair. She also described the doll in correct detail. Yes, there was also a picture of the doll on Amazon, and my aunt was pretty freaked out. To this day, she still hasn't opened the package. It's still just sitting in the closet. But a few weeks later, as a special Christmas gift, my aunt let me open the box. The doll was still inside. This story took place when I was around 8 years old, in my old neighborhood. I was next door neighbors with my best friend Alex. We both went to the same school and always hung out every day after. One day, I was bringing my Nintendo 64 to his house so that we could play together. Once I got it into his house, his uncle was there watching TV, so we couldn't use it. Today I now know that he wasn't his uncle, because my older sibling, which knew Alex's older sibling, told me that his parents rented out rooms to random people from their original hometown, so the uncle was just a random stranger from out of the country. He told us to go into his shed to search for an extra TV, so we opened the shed and started searching. We found an older TV, but we could use it. Then something started moving all the things around, and we thought it was a rat, so we didn't mind it first. Then we heard laughter, something so scary that I tried to leave, but Alex told me not to worry. We kept searching around for the laughter, and eventually found this one male doll that was around 2 feet long. It was all torn and battered, so we figured it was just broken. We sat it down and decided to go hook up the TV in his room. We played for a while until his uncle left the house for food and his parents were at work, so we were home alone. We started hearing noises at the house, but figured it was nothing. But then we heard the laughter. The doll was moving around the house carefully, which we saw through the small peek underneath the closed door. The doll was looking for something, probably us. We were both freaking out, but we knew we had to get away from the house. As we were leaving, we heard the doll laughing through the window. We stayed at my house all afternoon until his parents returned. Ever since that day, I've always experienced weird things at my friend's house, like having YouTube videos end abruptly and start playing other random things like clown videos, which I think is a cereal commercial from the 70s. I ignored all these weird signs for the rest of my childhood, and we recently met up, since we went to different high schools. Somehow the topic of the weird things was brought up, and I asked him if he remembered them. He said he did. but I wonder if this will be the end of the story. I certainly hope so. I live in a house with my great-grandparents, my grandma, my mum, and my brother. My great-grandparents got this house 50 years ago and had lived in it ever since. My grandpa passed away last October, and his stuff is currently in my closet. I stay in an old storage room, so everything that is not put to use is in my room. Ever since I got this mirror around Thanksgiving from my grandmother, crazy stuff has been happening. My grandmother got it from a kinda sorta not completely abandoned house. The landlord moved out, but left some of his stuff there, so my grandpa took it, which is where the mirror came from. My grandparents lived in a bungalow behind the house. When cleaning out the house, I saw the mirror and asked my grandmother if I could have it, because I thought it was pretty. I do not know how old the mirror is, but it is kind of worn down. Anyway, so the mirror was sitting on my bookshelf, because I hadn't hung it up yet. One day, I was cleaning my room, and the mirror literally flipped and landed in the middle of the room. There is no logical way that could have happened, because I did not make any movement that could have caused it to flip, and it went too far. It's almost as if someone pushed it. The mirror didn't crack, it was completely fine, so I didn't think much of it and put it back on my dresser, so that it wouldn't fall again. About 2 weeks after that, my deodorant was sitting on my headboard and flipped and landed in the middle of my room. At the time, I was on the phone with my boyfriend, so I told him about it, put the deodorant back, and joke around a bit, and that was it. Now, we are going to talk about things that have recently happened. So me and my boyfriend have basically been stepping our relationship up a bit, and any time we talk about something like that, or we talk about it over the phone, weird stuff happens. I went to shower while I was Skyping him, and my phone started messing up, so the call ended. I ran out the shower and called him back, but it took me about 5 minutes. One night, after we were talking about things, it was around 3:30 a.m. He was asleep, and we were still on the phone. My closet door started wiggling back and forth, and that continued all night. I can't remember anything else that happened, because I've gotten so used to it by now. Tonight, I was just in bed, and a bottle that was on my headboard fell right on my head. Maybe it's because I was moving a lot, and it freaked me out, but I'm not sure. I was talking to 2 of my friends about it, and they told me someone's story about what happened at their house. My first friend said my Harlequin doll fell off my shelf dresser. It's old, and it has a huge mirror and 2 shelves on each side, and landed on my floor. So she picked it up and set it on the dresser. When she came back, it was sitting on my bookshelf. My other friend said she woke up randomly in the middle of the night, and she couldn't move, and saw a white figure in the corner of my room, and she started to cry. Both of them just informed me now about this tonight. I also have a porcelain doll that I got from my 5th grade dance as a prize, and I'm in 10th grade now. I do not know the history of the doll, but it had moved before. It's a doll with brown hair, and she's a bridesmaid. It started turning and moving of its own accord, so my mum took it and put it in the top of her closet, maybe the beginning of this year, and we haven't taken it out since. But I've been talking about it. Now I'm not sure if I want to take it out or not. I honestly do not know what to do at this point. I don't know what's going on, and it creeps me out. I'm scared to move it. Till this day, when I tell people about my breathing doll, they don't believe me. They just say it was me, my vivid imagination. But my doll breathing was real, and the most vivid memory of my childhood, especially with unexplained experiences. The first time I saw the doll was at a flea market with my mum and grandmother, and I fell in love with it. It was a big doll, only about 14 inches. After begging my mum to buy it and failing, my grandma bought it for me. Man, I loved that doll like it were a real baby. I bought it baby clothes, shoes, bottles, and the like. Took him everywhere. I named him Rocky, and people often thought I was holding my baby brother. Well, one day, I was outside playing with Rocky, and I was being a little too rough with him, throwing him up in the air and letting him fall repeatedly, scolding him when he wouldn't sit up on my bike. So I got him and threw him as high as I could and tried to catch him, but he slipped through my hands into the ground. I picked him up to dust him off, and that's when I heard him breathing. It was heavy and angry and fast, like someone would sound if they were really annoyed. I threw him on the ground and stared at him shaking, absolutely terrified. I leave him there and run inside. My mum asks me what's wrong, and when I tell her, she laughs it off, as if it were nothing, says I'm being silly and to go and pick him up and bring him inside. I refused to touch him, and I screamed when she tried to force me. She gave up, picked him up, and looked at him and said, "See, he's just a doll, stuffing in plastic. He's not real. He can't breathe." That was the last day I ever played with dolls. I gave him to my brother for a home economics project he had, where you can carry around a bag of flour and pretend it's a baby, or something like that. Anyway, he used its head and attached it to the back of the flour to make it more babyish. He ended up getting extra credit for that. A few years later, the whole Chucky craze and killer doll movies were all the rage. All the while, I had a real demon doll of my own. When I was about 5, I had a little doll that looked like a girl. I was made fun of for having this at the time, because I'm a guy. And if you pulled a string, she would sing a melody that sounded like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, but the music box sounded broken. But I loved it. I took it to school, the courtroom, as we were adopting a little girl who is now my sister, and the store. No matter where I went, she went with me. But sometimes when you pull her string, she wouldn't stop playing, and it happened only at night, and it sounded more and more disoriented and demonic. But it didn't bug me. Someone stayed over and slept in my room, but they made me keep the doll in my room when I slept in my parents' room. It didn't bug me because I always had it on my dresser. But that night, we heard the person in my room screaming, and a door slam. Then the person slammed into my parents' room, trying to talk but couldn't get a word out. The only words I kept hearing was, "The door won't stop." And that's it. We took him down the stairs, sat him on the chair, and I was the last down because I grabbed the doll but hid it behind my back. When we calmed him down, he said, "I think that doll upstairs is possessed." It called my name and was staring at me with death in its eyes, and said that I was next when the music started playing and laughter came from it. He screamed at it to shut up, but it didn't, and so he fled. So this is a true story, and after we adopted my sister, my mum said she threw the doll away, because my parents started to hear her too. But now that I think of it, it was old, and did belong to a little girl that died in a car accident. I also want to let you know that we were doing some spring cleaning, and I found it in a box. I thought my mum had got rid of it, so I burned the box and its contents to ashes. My mum swore she got rid of it, so we'll have to wait and see what happens next. When I was very young, my grandmother had a painting that hung in the living room of her old house. The painting was of 2 women at a piano, one playing while the other listened, and pointed at the music, as if in the act of teaching the song. I would often sleep over at her house as a child. I have countless distinct memories of seeing the figures of the painting move at night. Not in an intelligent way, but in a sort of acting out the scene sort of way. Almost like how a GIF on the internet is nowadays. Constantly looped actions. The woman playing the piano would begin to actually strike the keys and tap her foot to the rhythm, while the other woman would nod her head in approval or disapproval as she judged the performance. There was no sound. I was so young, and saw the painting do this so often that I thought nothing of it, and accepted the idea that some paintings out there can move on their own. Decades later, I remembered the painting, and noticed I hadn't seen it in a long time. I asked my now very old grandmother about it. She told me that she had wrapped it in cloth and locked it in her closet. I jokingly told her that as a child I thought I saw the painting move at night. She went dead serious on me and said, "Me too, dear. Why do you think I don't put it up anymore? Thanks for telling me you saw it. I thought I was crazy all these years." When we would go to Sunday school every week, there were these two Raggedy Ann dolls. One was a boy, and the other was a girl. The girl was a bit off, you could say. It would always be further down the hallway after we threw it, and looked again. The church's basement was a big room with a hallway going off the stage, and classroom and stairs. She always had a missing eye. Other things would happen as well. Eventually, me and my sister took her home to fix her up, but we never did. One time, a few weeks ago, I put her on my bed and said, "If something is there, give me a sign." Then my doorknob jiggles. I then instantly scream and noped out of the situation by putting it on my shelf. Recently, she has been put into the attic.